So today's episode of the Risking It All podcast had Dinesh Hallan on, who is the owner of DA Accountants. Great story about Dinesh growing up as the son of an immigrant from India, going through the education system, initially as an engineer, then on to an accountant, working with some big banks, travelling all over the UK, visiting businesses from fish farms to aerosol cans and all the rest of it. So really, really interesting insight into accountancy and business. For anyone who's got any interest in that, Dinesh is your man, goes into it in great detail. So tune in today. Hello everyone, welcome to our first episode of the Risking It All in 2025. Welcome
Happy
back
New Year,
everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hope you've all had a good break. We're delighted to be joined by Dinesh Hallan today. So Dinesh is the owner and founder of DA Accountants, who is also the accountant for our own business, Jolly Media Marketing. He's been a massive help there, by the way, so we'll get into that. And we're really interested to hear about his story, how he got into accountancy, how he started his business and what his plans are for the future. So I'm not going to beat around the bush here and we're just going to get right into it. Dinesh, welcome.
Thanks for being here, Dinesh.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Not at all, mate. Absolutely. So, yeah, we know you're an accountant. We know you own an accountancy firm now, but talk us through how you got to that point. So start with your early years, Dinesh. Where'd you grow up, your family dynamic, and take us through for the
Okay, well, I'm a Cowcaddens man, or a boy. I grew up in Garnet Hill, which is now Chinatown, isn't it? It's the old Chinatown place. So that's basically, so I went to Garnet Bank Primary School, which was close by, and then Woodside Secondary School was the secondary school, about 15 minutes walk from Hill Street in Cowcaddens. Pretty much stayed there till about the age of 16, 17 before I moved on. So the school itself, I mean, there was all sorts of cultures in there because it was in the city centre. I mean, we were just a couple of streets away from Sucky Hall Street.
Right.
So you had all the nightclubs. Now, obviously, nightclubs didn't interest me for the first sort of 10, 11, 12 years, but certainly after that, you know, it was just a walk down and a walk back, and we had places like the Garage there. You know, that there was the Cotton Club was there as well. That was just round the corner. So you know, it was a great place to be growing up, and it was just a kind of streets away from going into Sucky Hall Street, Argyle Street as well.
So we'll definitely get into the Garage days at some point, right? We'll hear all about that. Before we get into that though, you mentioned about school and sort of progressing through that. So was there any subjects that you were really interested in school? Was there anything that you really gravitated to when you were young?
I mean, certainly in primary school, that there probably isn't any subjects other than the fact that I did a science project in the last year of my primary school, but that was in space, so really just the outer planets and our planets, basically, just looking at, you know, memorising every single planet in space, and that was probably my kind of topic at school. Always into football from a very, very early age. There was a teacher, it was a male teacher, probably the only male teacher in that primary school, and he set up leagues, mini leagues within the school, and, you know, I was captain of one of the teams. There was other teams within that league, and we used to play football during the week. So that was kind of the main sort of interests within the primary school. There was no other sort of, I didn't like English, I didn't like any other sort of subjects within that school, but it's only when I moved into secondary school that I started then, you know, you start getting into your subjects. And probably that's where I then enjoyed the science subjects, maths especially, and then you've got biology, chemistry and physics, and that eventually led me on to getting into the field of engineering, believe it or not. And not accountancy, but engineering when I moved on to university.
So would you say that you were a good student? You seem very academic. You don't seem like you were the class clown, but I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, do you know, I think having got to sort of year 2, and I think it was year 2, I had failed a couple of exams. Now this was the second year, and what had actually happened was that you either learned Latin or you didn't learn Latin, but you had to get into that class to be able to do it.
Right.
So, and I was really disappointed. I thought, you know what, there's so many other folk that are doing Latin and I'm not doing Latin. But anyway, it worked out well because then it allowed me to sort of look at the other languages, which was German and a bit of French as well. But yeah, I mean, I kind of stuck at it. You know, I enjoyed studying. I enjoyed sort of competing against other folk, my other friends, to be able to sort of get the best marks that were going, and really just went on then to sort of do the main science subjects in my 4th year, which was the O grades.
And what's your family dynamics? Do you have brothers and sisters?
I've got 3 sisters. 2 sisters born, so they were born 10 years before me, 10, 12 years before me.
Right, okay.
And they were born in India. So my mum and dad actually came to this country about 55, probably 60 years ago, actually.
Right.
And they had to come here. I think my dad said that he had to come into this country with a fiver, the old £5 note.
Right.
And, you know, that was the minimum that he could come into this country with. And my dad came first, and then my mum followed, and my 2 sisters came with them. So that was my 2 sisters born in India. And my other sister, who is a year younger than me, came with me. We were born here, and we grew up together in the same house. So that was kind of the family setup. So 3 sisters, myself, and my parents.
Right.
And yeah, it was a kind of, you know, it was probably a joyous moment when I was born because they wanted a boy after 2 girls.
So they told you anyway. We've actually had a few kids of immigrants on the podcast now, and we've spoken to previous guests about how there just seems to be something about like the kids of immigrants in this country where academically they just always seem to do really well. Were your parents quite strict in terms of like stick in at school, this is what we want for you? Did they exert that influence?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you know, if I'd said that I want to play football or I want to become a football player, do you know, that's a waste of time, my dad would have said. You know, it was, in fact, I suppose, you know, one of the things that he shows a great interest in is medicine and the medical field. Oh, why don't you become a doctor, you know, as opposed to anything else, you know? But most of all, it was really just, you know, get your head down and study. And he would, you know, he was very busy actually because he came to this country when he got a job as a bus conductor. And then became a bus driver. So that was him getting promotion to that field. Eventually he left, he set up a manufacturing business in clothing, and he ran that for a while, and then got into a convenience store. But, you know, just during that time, he had enough time to tell me, look, you need to study, get your head down, here's some books, try and look at them as well. So, yeah, I mean, I was always, you know, it was just thrust upon me. Whereas my younger sister, a year younger, she just wasn't into studying at all. And she left at the age of 16 and decided to go into the youth training scheme, which was the old YTS scheme.
Right.
And she did that and did something in bookkeeping or something it was, and just changed jobs since then.
Right, okay.
Right, okay. And what was it like? So it sounds like your dad was a really hard worker, you know, and managed to craft something for himself, which is brilliant. And then you've got your 2 older sisters and your 1 younger sister. What was it? I grew up in a household with 2 sisters, so not quite as crazy as yours, but similarities. How did you find that dynamic in the household? Were you surrounded with women, I suppose? You had 4 in there.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, Barry, that by the time I got to about probably 10 years old, my sisters were probably about 22, 23 years old, and they were kind of round about the age where they were going to get married because they had just, they'd done their job, they found a job, and they got to that stage where my mum and dad said, right, it's time for you guys to marry, and that's how it is in our culture. Certainly back then, and it was really they found someone from my eldest sister. She got married at the age of 23. So pretty much when I got to about that age, it was just me and my younger sister in that household.
Right, okay.
We had our own bedrooms. My mum and dad had their bedroom. We were staying in Hill Street at the time. And it was a 3-bedroom, large property, a tenement property. And, they just... there's just so much space there. My mum and dad were always out because they were working in the factory.
Yeah.
In the clothing manufacturing business, so it's pretty much my sister and me in the house then until about the evening when my mum and dad came back. We fought like every brother and sister do, but we had really fun times as well. My sisters actually moved out. My eldest sister, in fact, both sisters actually moved down south where they get married, and so pretty much didn't really see much of them then thereafter.
Yeah.
And it was only just occasional visits back.
All right. Well, going back to school, so you left high school. Was there further education, I'm assuming, after high school?
There was, yes. So I decided to try and do IT engineering or electrical engineering. So eventually I picked a degree in engineering. Went to Glasgow Uni, did 5 years there. It was actually a 4-year degree. Exams messed up in between that. Ended up on a kind of 5-year degree, but got through that, and it was just one of the sort of, it just wasn't enjoyable. I just didn't like engineering at all. But I decided to get through year 4, and in the 5th year, I decided to pick the accountancy and management options. So I did that, and then it was pretty much a conversion after that. So I got my degree in engineering, delighted to get it, and really didn't fancy it, and decided at that point I'm going to do a postgrad in accountancy. That was pretty much a conversion course getting into accountancy.
Right.
But that was going into Strathclyde Uni to do a 10-month diploma in accountancy funded by myself, because you had to then pay the fees at that stage when it went into postgraduate.
Right.
And then you're meeting all these folk there was a guy that done medicine, there was a guy that done law, there was a guy that done geography. So it was different disciplines, and you could only do that degree based on from a different discipline, really.
Right.
So I did accountancy, got my degree, and then eventually found my first job.
Right, well, you've took the words out of my mouth. We like to ask every guest, what was a proper job number 1 for you after you left uni?
I've got a quick question before that.
Go for it.
What made you go from engineering to accountancy before we get into your job? What made you sort of pivot?
I think it was just, Barry, it was just probably looking at the sort of financial press. When I was doing engineering, I didn't enjoy it. But then when you start reading other things, you have then that interest in finance, which I probably didn't have at primary school or secondary school, but you just get a bit more exposure to the financial papers and just other, the internet, I suppose, CFAX and the stuff that was on television at the time. And I kind of thought, well, do you know what? I do fancy that. Let's have a look at it. And there was probably other friends' influences as well.
Right.
Sort of latter part of the school, and they decided to pick it, and I thought, well, do you know what? I'm going to go for that as well. And at that stage it was just accountancy. It wasn't really going into business or anything else. It was just pretty much look at finance and then let's see what happens after that.
That makes sense, and there's obviously parallels with the numbers and the arithmetic, but sometimes it isn't a pure thought out decision with these things, isn't it? It's a bit of a gut feel.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things was that my dad was in business, and there was accounting figures there as well to look at, and I guess I thought that looks quite interesting. let's have a look at it further down the line. So hence the reason that I kind of moved. But I mean, you asked the question, I think it was you, Brian, about what was your proper job. I think my proper job probably was working as an Indian waiter in an Indian restaurant at the age of 16, because my mum and dad, well, my mum especially, said, well, do you know what? You need to get a job, right? This is me just about to get in the 4th year, 5th year, but get a job. And she'd spoken to my cousin who was running restaurants, and I decided to then say, okay, well let's move into a kind of part-time job at the weekends. And this was the Ashoka Ashoka Elderslie Street in the town, and that's where I started working. That was probably my proper job, and it was probably my best job of all time, because it was great. You were working there 6 hours, busy restaurant, and then once you're finished, you're probably hitting the nightclubs, and you're coming back home at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
I absolutely love immigrant parents in this country. I really do. There's just the British just don't have in my humble opinion, for the most part, just don't have the same work ethic. I don't think there would have been many parents that were like, do you know what, you're in that crunch period of university, really, you need to get focused on your exams, but get out and get a job and start earning. I love that, to be honest. All right, so proper job number 1, you were a waiter. And again, pretty much every podcast guest has said that their first job, no matter what it was, you feel more loaded than you've ever been in your life, because it's beer talking stuff, really. You've got no bills, really. You've no house, you've no car, you've no phone. I certainly, in that 1 year period where I started working and I was still living with my mum, remember thinking, I'm so low. I think I was maybe on 17 grand or something, and I was like, I am caked in cash here. Caked in cash, I don't know what to do with it all. And I've not quite made it back to the dizzy heights yet. So
I'm laughing as well, because you've mentioned about working in the restaurant and then going out to the nightclubs, and can you only imagine if we stayed within 100 or 200 yards of Sucky Hall Street? I could see how you got dragged into that. Oh my goodness. And it made me laugh, because we used to go to the garage as well.
Every Thursday in life.
Every Thursday.
I never missed a shift on a Friday ever. Nowadays, if I go out on a Saturday, sometimes I'm roping the Tuesday or Wednesday. But we were there, God, for years.
There was that many nightclubs. I mean, there was the Cotton Club there was the garage, and there was one or two others that I can't even remember now. They've kind of moved on, but there was so many in Sucky Hall Street. You could take your pick.
Just go to the one that you get let in. You just keep trying.
That's right.
So you were in the restaurant, enjoying yourself on Sucky Hall Street, as any person at that age in Glasgow would. What was the next few steps in your career in the build up to sort of graduating for uni then?
So when I graduated at Strathclyde Uni, that was the post-grad. Then I was looking for my first job, and I got a couple of sort of temp jobs, and one of them was at Motorola.
My mum worked in Motorola back in the day.
But this is Motorola in Bathgate.
Oh, was it? There was Eastcote Bride she was.
So this was a kind of shift job where it was pretty much engineering. It was on the phones, but I was promised the option of going into finance at that point there. So they said that you can go into this sort of test engineering job, but you've got the chance to move into a kind of finance department. But it was a shift job, so you had to start at 7 o'clock in the morning. So this is me leaving at sort of 6 o'clock Glasgow to get there for 7 o'clock, finishing at 3 o'clock and then coming back. But you're doing this pretty much every day. And then it was after 3 months of doing that job that I got into a bit of finance, but it was just a bit of finance and it wasn't really that interesting, to be honest.
Right.
But I stayed there for 6 months, got a job back in Glasgow, and this was a job, it was at TSB Home Loans.
Yeah, right.
And again, that was a kind of temping job as well. So decided to take it, and I thought, right, you know what, this will just get me onto the next sort of ladder, the rung of the ladder, to move into sort of accountancy. So did that for 6 months, But at that time, I had actually applied for a few jobs in accountancy and got my first, I guess, proper job in accountancy with George Walker, Chartered Accountants in Paisley.
Right.
And I was there for about a couple of years, actually. And that was pretty much what I'm doing now. But, you know, that was a kind of smaller firm. There's only 3 staff there. And George Walker, who was an ex-HMRC inspector, it was his practice.
Right. Okay.
And his wife used to come in, and there was 3 other members of staff, including myself.
That must have been handy.
Yeah.
And you know, it was a kind of shop front, so used to go in at, you know, getting there for 9 o'clock, and it's pretty much just doing very small jobs, really. But they had varied businesses, but probably, you know, and I kind of thought to myself that, you know, if I ever do this kind of job where I'm setting up myself, this is what it's going to be like, you know, and it's possibly going to be a shop front. And, you know, I'm going to be doing sort of trial balances. And at that time, there was no Sage, there was no Xero. It was just all paper extended trial balances. But
and was, excuse my ignorance, right? But was accountancy back then simpler? Have things got more convoluted and complex as the years have gone by? Or is it just much of a muchness?
It is pretty much of a muchness. I mean, I guess, you know, it was just all on paper. So you had loads of files. Nowadays, you don't have files. You've got electronic records and they're all saved on a drive. You've got electronic postings. You've got invoices that you can scan as well. Whereas there, it was just all files, you know, sort of paper bags, plastic bags that were handed in, and you had to just go through the bag and just take out invoices and then start writing out the sort of amounts and the supplier names. But, you know, the job itself was still, you had to balance your books, you had to balance your balance sheet, etc. So, you know, it was all kind of getting through all of that. But I thought, do you know what? See, working for somebody and doing this day in, day out, it's pretty boring. But, you know, you know, this is a job that I've chosen now, and I've pretty much got to do it now. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I applied to a bigger firm and eventually moved out of there into Gilchrist and Company, which was in the city centre, Bath Street, actually.
Right.
And then I spent a few years there. It was about 3 years before I qualified as a chartered accountant.
Right, okay.
That was actually going to be a question of mine then. So obviously you do your post-grad and then you get into an accountancy firm. How long does it then take you to become a chartered accountant from that point when you're in the industry?
Once you've got your degree, so you've got your degree and it pretty much gives you exemptions for the first few papers of the professional exams. So you've got to do the professional exams, and that generally takes about 3 years.
Right.
But with the 3 years, you've got to have minimum 3 years experience to then become a qualified accountant. So in between that, you're working for Gilchrist and Company, you're doing the exams, and while I was working for Gilchrist and Company, I was actually getting sort of day releases out to a college to, you know, do the exams there as well. But I did that during my working period. But the hardest part is actually coming home and studying for these professional exams, because you're working 9 to 5. 5 days a week, and then you've got to come back home and you've got to study for these exams, you know.
I again, we've spoke about this a lot, but I always find, see, when you're having to study for something, when you've got like big boy stuff happening, as I call it, life, just working kids, like we've had that on a few occasions where maybe before the agency, but you're doing a qualification of some sort and you've got a bit of homework at night, a bit of studying. It's so much harder. I've never been great at studying, to be fair. It just doesn't play to my nature. But I found it so difficult when I had to do it as an adult, when I had big boy stuff. Just because, as you say, you come home, you're knackered. I really just want to sit on the couch and, you know, watch a telly and vegetate.
Definitely challenging. From the only time I've ever been able to do it, because I'm a field engineering student. I studied that at uni. You've done a lot better than me in that space, but The only time I ever done it was when I done night school for that business diploma in consulting, and I can remember it vividly because it was the only time I had to study for something that I was really interested in.
Yeah.
And that's the only way I made through that. But how did you get through your night studies and your chartered accountancy?
I mean, you just do it because you have to do it, and you know that once you've started it, you've got to get through these exams. I mean, I had resets during the professional exam stage as well, but you know, you're kind of in it with everybody else that's doing the exams as well. So you just sit down together in a library. And you know, and the thing with the professional exams is that at that time it's a wee bit simpler now, Brian, because you're saying how are the sort of you know, the job, the accountancy job now compared to previously. But with the accountancy exams now, that back then it was a case of you had to sit 3 exams in one sitting at one stage, but you have to pass all of them. And if you fail one of them and you get under 30%, you have to sit all 3 again.
God.
So there was one instance where I had passed 2 and I failed 1, but it was over 30%. So you could, that was a referral, it was called at the time. So you just then had to sit that exam.
Right.
But if you fail that, whether you get under 30 or over 30, you had to sit all 3 again.
Right.
And fortunately, I didn't get to that stage. So I'd never had a situation where, you know, I failed passed 2, but failed 1, which was under 30. I got a referral. Nevertheless, I did fail exams and it took me a wee bit longer, but eventually I got through those exams. And you just have to put your head down. I mean, it is tough. You know, you're studying at weekends as well. Gilchrist and Company was quite demanding, actually, because, you know, you've got the bigger companies there. You're going out to do audits. You could be going to a car garage, a car showroom up in Perth, and you're spending 2 or 3 days there just doing these stock audits, counting cars basically, or counting the parts of those cars. But that's part of accountancy, you know, because you're doing audits. I mean, we don't do audits in my firm, but we certainly did it when I was at Gilchrist and Company. So it was pretty much, you know, it was intense. You're coming back home after 2 or 3 days, and then you think, right, I need to get back into these the studies and these exams then.
That's interesting. I didn't think that would be something within accountancy. So that's like a inventory check or a stock take. Is that so you can assess the value of the assets on your accounts?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 components to a set of accounts, as you know. You know, because you do the obviously the postings to zero, but you've got a profit and loss account in your balance sheet. And, you know, people ask me, so you've got your profit and loss and a balance sheet. What's a balance sheet? I say, well, think of it this way, right? You've got what's in your bank account. So what you're earning, right? Whatever you earn that's on your P60, that is your profit and loss account. What is in your bank account, your house, your car, that is your balance sheet at a snapshot. So, you know, any day, that is your balance sheet. What you've got is your worth. That's your balance sheet. And then you've got your profit and loss account. So in your balance sheet, you've got your stock, you've got your trade debtors, etc. And as part of accountancy, you've got to go out to these places. And, you know, I was going out to fish farms counting, not so much fish, but it was pretty much, you know, going out to these farms and you're looking at the components that sort of the machinery that captures the fish and how it's counted, etc. So you're doing all of that as part of accountancy as well, and that was part with Gilchrist and Company and a job that I took on after Gilchrist and Company. But auditing, when you're going into accountancy, there's a number of disciplines. I mean, I suppose you can become a tax accountant, you can become a general practitioner, you can be an auditor or an insolvency practitioner.
Right.
And I did audit at Gilchrist and Company, hated it because it was pretty much ticking and bumping a lot of the stuff. Tax was the most interesting. So I had a lot of exposure to that. And eventually, when I moved out of Gilchrist and Company, I was then going into a job that kind of, well, it wasn't actually tax, but it was just more money. And, you know, obviously there's greater benefits. And that's when I eventually then joined Bank of Scotland after I'd left Gilchrist and Company.
Right, interesting. And what did you do for Bank of Scotland?
Well, I was there 11 years,
Right, okay.
and they had various divisions, but it was one of my sort of colleagues in Gilchrist and Company that had already joined the old division of Bank of Scotland, and I joined as a surveyor stroke auditor for Bank of Scotland, and that's where really the biggest audit jobs were. So I was pretty much doing audit, but analysis of profit and loss and balance sheets. And you were pretty much working from home. So you could go into the office. I mean, initially you were going from home, but you were doing a lot of the work. It was going out to see a business for a day, and it could be a fish farm, it could be a toy shop. And I was going up and down the country. I was going down to places like Southampton, up to Lerwick in the Shetlands and Orkneys and the Outer Hebrides. So the bank was just booking flights for you. And, you get a company car. So that was an attraction to join the bank. You get a mobile phone. You had all the other benefits like share options and stuff like that. So that was so it was probably the money factor that allowed me to join the bank. And the jobs were really interesting simply because you were travelling all the time. You were in this car, and you were just all over the place.
When you're young, that's appealing. I hope that doesn't offend you in any way. But we were the same, travelled a lot in our 20s, I guess, and early 30s, and you feel like you're high flying. But I think as you get a wee bit older, you're like, I can't even get worse nowadays. I just want my own bed.
It gets a bit of a slog, doesn't it?
We had one night in a hotel last week, and I was like, I can't wait to get home to my bed.
Struggling to see by 9:30. I've got a couple of questions, because obviously you've mentioned fish farm, toy shop there. If you remember back to all those businesses you audited over the years, this is actually going to end up being two questions, but was there anything that really blew your mind when you first started looking under the bonnet of a business, thinking, I had no idea this is how, this kind of business operated? Was there any that kind of blew you away or surprised you?
I mean, I think every business surprises you because you don't have an understanding of it until you actually see it. But I went to a place. It was a factory in Ayrshire, and they supplied aerosols to football clubs, and they had a massive section of aerosols being supplied to Rangers Football Club. And I thought, this is incredible, all different shapes of aerosols and colours on it, and how we're supposed to be here to count these now, but you take a sample of them, but it's the fact that what is actually in the aerosol can, and then you start talking to the directors, and they say, well, this is how it's manufactured, and this is what we put in, this is the machinery, and you've got these arms coming over. So I guess I suppose it allows you to explore many other things in life then, just what's getting done. And you think, all right, do you know what? I'll Google that and see how that's done. And then it leads you on to something else. So, and it's the fact that the variety within accountancy is just huge. It's so diverse. The types of businesses out there. I mean, I've kind of mentioned fish farms and kind of aerosols, but there's so many others that I can't even remember in this minute in time. But there's just so many.
Such a wide range.
Yeah.
Do most accountancy practices remain broad? Like they typically don't target a sector, as it were. Like they won't target construction or digital marketing. They just remain quite broad and will work with anybody, really.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, if you go to, for instance, a kind of dentist or a doctor, they are general practitioners. And then if there's something complicated, that they'll say, right, I'll refer you to a brain surgeon or, a heart surgeon, for instance. Accountants are pretty much the same in practice. They're general practitioners, but you will get accountants out there, and I know a couple of accountants that are specialising in dentistry, for instance. They've got dentists as their clients, or it'll be the healthcare division. But broadly, I mean, a lot of the accountants in Glasgow or any city in the UK are pretty much general practitioners, and they'll specialise in tax, but they'll specialise in tax for every type of sector.
Right, okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, the title of the podcast is Risking It All. So at some point, we know that you've risked it all and pulled away that safety blanket of salary and benefits to go it alone, and you've now got a thriving business. But we like to always try and understand, cast your mind back to when did you start having those thoughts of, I could probably do this myself and earn a wee bit more money or have more freedom, or whatever your driving factor was?
I think, I spent 11 years in the bank. The bank went through various name changes. It was Bank of Scotland, then became Lloyds Banking Group. And in between that, it was Capital Bank as well. And I kind of specialised in the invoice discounting and factoring sector. But sort of 6 years from when I started in the bank, I think the travel kind of got to me, and then we had a baby girl that came along, and you want to spend more time at home, and it was at that stage I kind of thought, right, I need to now start working within the office and not doing as much travelling. And then from an auditor I became got more exposure to a bit of underwriting as well, but it was really sort of year 7, year 8 into that 11-year Bank of Scotland journey that I thought, I'm seeing a lot of businesses here, and potentially some of these could be my clients if I started looking after them. But I'm still going out to see clients, and I thought, right, you know what, it might be good if I can try and get a bit, a wee sideline and try and build up a customer base. And I think my first customer actually was where we had to get our house rewired, and an electrician was looking at it, and he started asking me questions, and he says, what do you do? I said, well, I'm an accountant at the bank. He says, all right, do you do accounts? And I says, I don't. He goes, I'm kind of fed up with my accountant, and I wouldn't mind sort of, you looking at some of my figures and seeing if they make sense. And I thought, well, I could have a look at it. I'm not sure, but I could have a look at it. And it was at that point I thought to myself, do you know what? I think I could probably do this myself. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started then swaying towards business and sort of looking at, general practice. But I couldn't afford to, obviously, because you're still in a job. You've got the company car, you've got all the other benefits. But I then started advertising in newspapers and, just put my name out. And
a side hustle almost?
Pretty much, okay. Yeah. I mean, I probably had about 4, 5, 6 clients, within that sort of 6-12 month period. And the reason that I was able to do that, to look after them, is because I was still working from home for the bank, because you were pretty much going in to see a client. And I shouldn't probably say too much of this here, but you're seeing the bank's clients, and if you had a spare hour where you've finished early, you come back and then you can service your own customer base. Then I just thought, right, what I'm going to do is at the weekends I got leaflets printed up, and I went from door to door, business to business, right. And just thought I'll drop them off. We'll see how much business I can pick up from here.
Did the bank know you were doing it, or did you just try and keep it to yourself?
I think word got out, pretty much, that,
not from you though.
So they pretty much would have clocked on at that stage. Not that anyone had said anything. I was still devoted to the bank. I was still putting the time in. But yeah, I mean, I thought to myself that I need to now start building this up. And I walked into a shop once, and it was a convenience store actually, and it was an Asian shopkeeper in there, and I said, look, there's my leaflet. If you need an accountant, let me know. and he goes, son, no, we've got an accountant, and we don't need an accountant, but I'll pass this over to my son. And, he passed it over to his son, who was a dentist, and he called me within a few days, and he eventually became my client, but he then referred other people to me as well. And, it was incredible. And this just shows that, it doesn't matter how small a business it might be, but you just never know how many doors it can open up further down the line.
Oh, we're in that world, eh? So for me, there's a couple of key lessons there, because I think a lot of people that are listening won't be in business but have an ambition to get something going. How do I do it? But I'm in a similar position where I've got a mortgage and kids, and I just can't afford to go gung-ho, let's just go for it. Like we did, like you've did. It'll amaze you when you actually sit down and look at your day, how much potential time is available for you to get something going. Lunch hours, just after work. And then I think the second lesson is, you were quite blasé about it. Just I went door to door,
Yeah.
I walked into shops, I gave them a leaflet. There's very few people, I would suggest, that have the balls to do that. Like, there just isn't. That's just not how people are cut nowadays. Most people want to hide behind a computer and maybe send out some emails.
Yeah.
And there's something to be said for, there's so many of the successful entrepreneurs that we've had on. A few that spring to mind, Scott Smith talking about being in Imran's shed, his business partner, and just calling businesses all day long, calling letting agents, can we help you, can we help you? And it's not going to come to you. You just need to find a way to make it happen proactively.
Yeah, and I say that to a lot of people. You've got to do something about it. You can't just sit there and let it come to you. You've got to put the effort in. And people say, "Oh, do you know he's so successful?" And it's incredible. I says, well, he is successful, and I know he's not putting the time in now, but he's putting a lot of time yesterday. And that's how he is now so successful. But you've got to do that. You've got to just put the graft in, and it doesn't matter how small it might be. Just do it. Just light the spark, and obviously, you get that spark, and it will probably lead to something bigger.
Yeah, definitely. I think blasé is a good word. You just kind of, I just went chatting folks' door, but kudos to you, Dinesh, because as Brian said, not many folk do that.
Yeah.
So that happened. You got a few people in. When did the tipping point come when you were like, right, it's time for me to leave my job, which you'd worked really hard and progress to get? Wouldn't have been an easy decision to make. But when did that decision point come? When was the point where you went for it?
I mean, obviously I had to then get on another few clients, and I got to a stage where I thought, right, well, I'm earning a salary here. I'm also earning through this business as well. So I'm pretty much now, although it's not as much as that, I can put this money aside. I don't need it, but I'll just allow this to build up for another couple of years. I was in the bank for 11 years, but kind of year 8 I had started. So by year 3 of getting to the end, I thought to myself, well, I've got a bit of money there now. If I leave that job, I can use that money then just to go alone. But the bank were actually announcing redundancies, and a lot of them were VRs at the time.
Happy days.
And I thought to myself, well, I could probably get this. And one or two people did get it. I was involved in the risk department within the Bank of Scotland, and unfortunately, I applied and I didn't get it.
Oh, no.
Oh, that would have been so
Heartbreak.
perfect.
Yeah, and the thing was, the sort of word came back that, well, you're in risk. This is a very demanding, department, and we want you, and you've got to stay. But I didn't want to stay at that stage. I got to that year, and I just thought to myself that I need to move out. I need to make a decision. If I don't get the VR, and it was a fairly substantial package actually, because it was actually a month for every year which we were going to get paid on, and so that was 11 years, so it was a decent amount. Anyway, I didn't get it, and I thought, right, I need to move out now. But see, within sort of 2-3 months, because I had then heavily advertised and I was getting a lot of referrals, I just thought, right, I'm going to move. And probably within sort of 4 or 5 months of me moving out, my income from the business was pretty much at the same level as it was that I was getting at the bank. And then at that stage, I had found an employee, set up an office in the house. And, so I was doing it initially myself, and I thought, right, well, do you know, I've got a few payrolls that I need to do now, and I can't do them myself. Mm-hmm. I need to get somebody in. And she was then coming into the house every day in a wee front bedroom. And we kind of just moved on from there. And then it just grew and grew.
When was this? What was the tipping point? Was you jumped in full time at year?
So I would have left the bank in 2010.
2010, right?
Yeah,
okay.
So it would have been just a year after
incredibly
that.
15 years ago now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Not long after a couple of years after the financial crisis. Was that the driver?
That's what it was. Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it was. And I think 3 years prior to that, 8 years into the bank job, that's pretty much when I'd started, plus another 15. So it's been about 18 years now, really, since I've...
And in the world of professional services, is are referrals a real key lead gen channel? Is that where most of your work typically comes from, or is it like any other business where that just comes in time, but you need to be bullish and get out there and try and bring it to you initially?
Yeah, no, pretty much. I mean, a lot of them are referrals. It's that snowball effect. The more clients you have, the more clients you can pick up, because obviously you get more referrals. And that's, I mean, I've got some exposure on the internet, yellow advertising, etc. But I don't rely on that really. And I don't really need clients from internet advertising, because I've got a lot of them from referrals. I still, will mention my names now and again. I'll say that it's DA Accountants that I work for, and this is my business. But pretty much my clients do a lot of the work for me. I've got a very good dental client, and he's put my name on a dental forum. And there's dentists that see me on that as well. Mm-hmm. So, you get sort of referrals that way as well. But it's pretty much now word of mouth. And that's probably the best business, actually. And you guys have come through a referral as well.
Aye, so we did.
Aye, we did. We certainly did. And I'm very grateful for the person that referred us to you, Dinesh, because you've been absolutely fantastic for us. So referrals and your sort of determination with your flyers and getting your name out, that got you going. Was there anything that happened early on in your business career when you were flying solo, which was a challenge that you had to overcome, being so new into the game?
Yeah, no, I think it was just the fact that I was working from home. You've got one employee, and then I had taken on another employee, and then another employee, and I thought to myself, right, we're doing an extension to the back of the house. And, my wife was working outside, and, we were in the house. But I thought to myself that having done the extension, we'd built another office at the back. And that's where the staff were sitting then. They were coming in every day, 5 days a week. So there was 3 members of staff coming in. And I just thought, this can't go on, because, if I fall ill and our bedroom's upstairs, they could be coming in, they're downstairs, and this just doesn't look right at all. So we got the extension done, we got the office made, there was 4 computers that went in as well. But very quickly, I just thought, this has got to change. And, I'd made a decision at that time. I thought, right, we need to move out. And I'll look at a property. Let's look at a flat, a kind of local property. And it was one of these new build properties. And I'd taken my employee along as well. And we looked at it. And I thought, we could actually work from here, right? But it just takes us out the house, and it's in a tenement. But I hadn't given any consideration to, whether we were allowed to work from a tenement flat. It was a front door, whether I would get planning permission. But I thought, let's just put an offer in for it, right? And it was already let out. It was a landlord that decided that, I've had enough and I'm going to sell it. It was run down, but it was a brand new build property. It was only 6 years old, but the tenants in there that just sort of wrecked it. And I thought, well, I'll do it up. I'll get it done up, and I'll get this rented out. And not rented out, but we'll move in. We'll get the computers in. It was a massive lounge. It was an open plan, and then I put the offer in, and nothing happened. And it just went on. And I thought, I still want the property, but I need to make a move on this now. I need to get out of the house because I'm desperate to move out. So then went along to Spearsbridge Business Park and had a look at it, and I absolutely fell in love with the office that I saw there. And I thought, what am I stupid? Here's me looking at a property, where this is the ideal place to be. So then my employees looked at it and we decided to move in. Now at that time, that property that I'd put an offer in for, it kind of just lingered on, and I thought, I definitely don't want that property, and hopefully it just falls off. But after 4 months, the agent came back to me and said, that property's now available, do you want it? And I thought, not really. Mm-hmm. She goes, well, it's still available and you can get it for the price that you've bid. And I thought, right, okay, let me look at it. I got a surveyor in and decided to buy it and just rented it out. I got it done up and I rented out. And I thought, well, the rent I get from that pretty much covers the rent that I'm getting. That's the way I looked at it. And I thought, I'm paying a rent there. I didn't want to pay a rent to someone, but I'm getting a rent from this property that will cover the rent on that side. So that's how it was. And, the sort of tipping point in in my own house was just, this is just getting really difficult. I've got staff coming in, that they're using our bathroom in the kitchen and stuff, and we need to get out here.
That old cliche about, you need to separate your work from home life. I mean, that must have been tricky in that environment.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of thought to myself that, you were talking about risk, and I thought, well, now I've taken one risk, which is leave my job, and I've moved into business, and I think the next stage now is really to, I suppose, look at the risk of paying rent, and is the business going to prosper? Because I'm committed to this rent that's going to be paid to the business park. But again, once I got into the business park, it was just a lot more clients coming through, a lot of referrals, and it just kind of took off from there.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you a question on, it seems like you made kind of concurrent hires quite quickly. A lot of business owners we speak to, maybe out with this podcast, to be fair, are typically quite scared of hiring. They're like, I want to get off the tools or out of the weeds. I'm not quite there yet. And then other people say, just hire you before you need them, get them in place. People's what make it. What gave you the confidence, I guess, in those early days to go, I just need another body in to help? Was it literally just looking at the money and going, there's enough there, it's cool, let's take the risk?
It was, Brian. I mean, the thing was, it's when you're actually working and you take on other clients, you get to a stage where you just can't cope at all, because there's demands, there'll be emails coming through, and you think, well, the only way to do this is to actually give it to somebody else. Now, I could outsource it. And in actual fact, when I was running, when I was looking for a job and I was still at the bank, there was another accountant that outsourced work to me because I was then advertising to look for work, additional work, so that I can make a move into business. And I thought, well, that I've had that experience, and that guy that was based in Shawlands, actually, I was going into his office even at the weekends just to do the extra bit there. And I thought, well, I can probably outsource it, but rather than outsourcing it, I'll just take on an employee on a part-time basis, and then it'll become a full-time basis. And I could afford it. The money was coming in. But I think the next stage was really then taking on more employees. And, when you've got the sort of cash flow then is another factor. You've got profitability, which is one thing, but you've got to look at cash flow. Is that customer going to pay you regularly? Because I had no customers on standing order at that stage. It was just a case of doing the job, invoicing it, and then waiting for that money to come in.
Right, okay.
So you think, right, well, I'm going to have to now fund from my savings. And I was, from a kind of early day, my dad had taught me to save. He was a saver, he just wouldn't spend. And any extra money that I did make, I was saving, and I thought, well, I can use that money if I've got a kind of difficult patch. Then I'll just use the savings to cover the sort of gaps in the business. But it was just a case of just taking on an employee and then trying to get that money coming in from a customer to fund it. But, you know, it was a risk, but it kind of paid off.
Aye, more often than not, to be honest, the entrepreneurs that we speak to that say, "Oh, I just took the risk of getting another body in," it tends to pay off. You don't really hear many. You hear it on occasion, but they're by exception saying, "We pulled that lever and got another body in to help, and I really regretted it." You know, it's just getting people over that line, and we went through that journey as well. You look at the numbers, but it becomes a bit paralysis by analysis, and you go, "But we're in, we're out," and then you speak to other people, and that can influence you sometimes when you've got people across the desk that say, "Just go for it, you'll never look back, you need people."
You just need to back yourself at the end of the day, don't we? We've got another 2 joining, which we need to tell you about as an accountant, Dinesh, actually.
But that's the thing. I mean, see when you get later on in life, you take less risk. But when you're young, you just think, look, you know, if you don't take the risk now, you're never going to manage it. You know, so you got to make that move. It might not work out, but you've got to take the risk there.
So you get your team members in. You get into your office, which I believe is still the same office you're in today.
It is pretty much. I mean, when you walk into my office, there's an opposite door, and that was the office that we were in first.
Ah, right, okay.
So that was a slightly smaller office in the back end of the building, a wee bit darker on that side. But on the side that we're on just now, there was an MP, Ken McIntosh, was the tenant in that property, and he was the Labour MP.
Kicked out.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Kicked out in the office anymore.
Well, they lost I think it was the European Parliament or something, and at that point he decided to move out, and that was a bigger office, and the administrator in the business park said to me, "Look, do you know what? You're looking for a bigger office. Do you want this one?" I had a look at it, and then again, you know, you're thinking, well, it's a lot more rent. Am I going to have the business to be able to afford this? But you know, I kind of done the sums, and, you know, that's the first thing that I do. Obviously, being an accountant is, right, let's see, that's the cash flow. This is what the rent is. This is how many clients I need to cover that. And, you know, you go through the sums, you think, right, this is absolutely fine. And, you know, I always leave a bit of a headroom there. So kind of got that covered.
It must be so handy running a business as an accountant. Do you feel like there's a trade-off somewhere? So typically what I've found when you speak to business owners, right, is when you meet somebody that's really good at accounts, they're often not so good at something else that's pretty key, like maybe sales or operations, managing people. Do you feel like you've got like a pitfall somewhere that you need to hire people around you to support because you're so good at accountancy and that's just the way that your mind's wired?
Yeah, I mean, I am accountancy. I mean, you know, I've got no skills in many other things. I mean, you know, I probably have knowledge of it, but when it comes to IT, I tend to rely on just other people. Same with, I guess, advertising, but I don't do a lot of it simply because I've got that word of mouth referral business. But, you know, when it comes to accountancy, and whether I'm buying something that's kind of major, I'm doing the full analysis on it, and I'm pretty sad at it. You know, accountants are boring. You know, I'm probably one of them. But, you know, I'll sit and do the sums, and I'll use spreadsheets to work out the figures myself, and you know, just do all of that myself.
I think that's a really, as you say, Brian, it's a good skill to just be able to go like that and do that.
Oh, God, there's so much I would trade to have the ability to... I mean, I'm getting there.
You're getting there.
But I do think accountancy, a lot of business owners, in the trades in particular, in our experience, there's just a lot of burying heads in sand that happens. They know that there's a shortfall there in terms of their knowledge and understanding of how to keep an eye on things. But rather than just, it is easier, I think, when you're sat at a desk for 8 hours a day. When you're out and about and seeing customers, it's tricky to find the time. But I would imagine you've seen some horror stories where it gets to tax time and folk are like, oh my God, like that's not there.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, you've got the most qualified professionals, like, for instance, dentists, doctors, and solicitors, and they are absolutely awful at their paperwork. And you think to yourself, you've gone to uni and you've done all this and you've got the knowledge, but you just can't, you just don't understand figures at all. But I've got to understand that myself. I've got to understand why they can't understand it, because that's why they're hiring me. But it's amazing, that they ask you sort of basic questions, right, so how do I pay this, or how does that relate to my figures there, or what is that in my balance sheet? And I'm thinking, well, I know it really well, but how come you don't know it after so many years? But they don't, because they're obviously very good at their own job. Which, and obviously I don't know your job, but they kind of just rely on you 100% to be able to do the job.
Yeah,
for them.
I've experienced that myself before joining you, Dinesh. I had an accountant which was a bit of a rogue, to say the least, and I trusted everything he said and realised that I was in the shit a wee bit with fines and frantically phoned Dinesh, who sorted it all out. And I've went on a journey with accounts with. I might be a pain in the arse sometimes, Dinesh, because I love asking questions, but I'm in this mindset now of I'm never going to know accountancy as much as my accountant, but I need to know it well enough to be able to understand it.
Aye.
And I don't know, do you think that's possibly, with some of the businesses that you've maybe seen getting some trouble with accounts, do you think that's maybe something that business owners ignore? They just rely too heavily on the accountant and then start scrambling when you start telling them the true picture of what's due and
yeah,
so
I think you're right, Barry. I mean, I think you've got to understand your own business, and you've got to understand the basic figures. If you don't understand them, it's very difficult to run a business. I mean, you've got to remember that it doesn't matter what business you're in, whether you're in, advertising, social media, law, for instance, you've got to understand your figures, because the thing is that with accountancy, we can certainly advise, we can do the figures, but when we send the figures to the client, there'll be certain aspects of those figures that they've got to understand to be able to run the business going forward. It's a bit like, you getting your teeth done in the dentistry's right. I've done it, and, you've now got to look after them. But make sure that you do this, you wash your mouth and you do this and you do that. But see, if you don't do that, then, you're just going to have problems with the teeth, the new teeth that you've got. And it's the same with accounting figures. Once the VAT returns or the accounts have gone back to the customer, you've got to say, right, well, that's what they've given us, and we've got to now take action against those figures going forward. And if you don't do that, then obviously your business is not going to prosper.
Aye.
Yeah,
I think, I'd maybe take it a step further than you need to just know the basics. You do really, as the business owner, need to be all over, because you can't make informed decisions if you don't understand what's happening in the financials of the business. And with the best will in the world, no matter how great your accountant are and how respondent they are, you don't want to be phoning every 5 minutes and going, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? Some people might, but when you're in a small, nimble, agile business, sometimes you just need to act quickly. And I think if you can understand the financial health of your own business, and even things like, when it comes time to sign VAT off or sign off end of year accounts, it's just so much easier when you've got a handle of it and you're just reaching out to you to go, we think we understand it, is that right? Aye, it is, cool. Or no, we need to tweak that, right? Happy days, let's get it sorted.
Yeah.
It still amazes me how there's people, I guess, that just ignore it and then go, right, it's end of year, what's happening?
Yeah, they bury their head in the sands, really. And, we've still got a lot of clients that are coming to us in the month of January to say, here's the figures, can you do the tax return in the space of 2 weeks before the deadline? In fact, we've picked up 3 or 4 clients now, and either they're moving from another accountant and they said, look, we've had enough. I know you've only got 2 weeks. We don't mind the penalty, but can you just do it? And there's others that don't have an accountant, and we're actually dealing with that sort of stuff in the last couple of days. But we don't mind, because they're new clients, and obviously, we understand that they've just they don't understand figures at all, and we've got to help them. But, you know, it's not just about actually us doing the accounts and processing the figures. We've got to make our clients understand their figures as well. You know, that is you know, it's we're not just bookkeepers there, but you know, we've got to make them understand that, look, if you have that impact on your figures, there's the tax implications there, and you've got to look at it going forward. You know, whether it's buying a car or buying machinery, why you should buy machinery today and not in 3 months' time, because this is how it will impact on your corporation tax, your income tax, because taxes are here for life. Unfortunately, you've got to be paying this every year. So you've got to, you know, it's got to be proactive in accountancy and tax. It can't be reactive, unfortunately.
And as accountancy as a service, like is it quite a collaborative space? Like, the accountants talk to other accountants, work together, pass business, or is it quite guarded? Like, I'm not letting you into the hen house because you'll steal my stuff.
No, I mean, we do. I mean, I'm looking at a business. It's the solicitors that are now dealing with the due diligence work. It's a pharmacy purchase, and, you know, it's a wee bit complex, actually. It's coming out of a group company. And I had to speak to a fellow accountant in the city centre. You know, he's a good friend, and, you know, I've just got to get his take on it. But we do, you know, there's a lot of forums out there as well, but we do talk as accountants. I was actually talking to an accountant while driving to this podcast office this morning. And, you know, it was just picking his brains on something. He was picking my brains on something. So we tend to do that, you know. We don't know it all, but we've got a very good tax team. So if you ask me a really complex tax question, Brian, we would be able to go back to our tax team and say, look, you know, this is the query. Are you able to help with that? And they'll just be able to advise over the phone, or they can send us an email, and then they allow us to then, you know, dig into other paperwork and be able to get a definitive on that question that you've just raised.
Right,
Okay,
right.
makes sense.
That makes sense.
One thing I was going to ask you, Dinesh, you mentioned about mergers and acquisitions, which will definitely due diligence. I think I might have said that.
Did
you
I
said
say
that
right?
You have.
I always
I
struggle
sometimes
with
get it
that
wrong
one as well. But what, obviously, with my background being systems and processes and IT and stuff, when did the online accounting software come into the game? Was that when you had your own business, or was that already starting to appear when you were in Bank of Scotland? Things like QuickBooks and Xero and stuff. Yeah,
I think I was at Gilchrist and Company probably, before, what was it, 99 was it? That's when you had Sage. I don't think Xero was around at that time, but Sage was there, but that was the desktop version.
Right.
So you had that, and I think desktop then was... it was probably Xero and Sage then came round about just after my bank days, actually, because the bigger businesses were using it. But, you know, it's been around for a long, long time. Not Xero and Sage, but there's been other accounting packages there.
Other things, yeah.
But it's kind of exploded in the last sort of 10, 15 years, really, you know, and probably in the last 10 years, actually.
Last
because
10 years.
I mean, Xero, I don't know, it's not a British product. It's one from overseas, but it's the biggest because they advertise a lot more than Sage and QuickBooks. I think I was a sucker to one of their ads. That was the one I chose. But what I was thinking is that when I used to work in consultancy, you know, it used to be really challenging to get somebody to stop using a notepad and start using an online notepad. Yes.
Now, when you think about going from accountancy in a book to an online accountancy, that's a whole different level of leap. Was it challenging to go from written, because you would have learned the trade writing, I'd imagine. Was it challenging to make a transition to digital, or did you just get on with it and it was fine?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was. You know what a trial balance is in relation to accountancy, but we had the extended trial balance. It was a massive Excel spreadsheet. It was on paper, actually, and you had to put your figures in and then do the journals in between that and eventually end up with a final trial balance and then convert that to a set of accounts. But, you know, gradually over the years, when I was at Gilchrist and Company, you just get more exposure to just IT, basically computers. and how you post figures, and then you just learn from that. So it's kind of baby steps that then eventually lead you to the online packages.
So it wasn't like a big bang where it was like, right, one day we're doing big sheets of paper, next day we're online. It was more of a gradual thing.
It was gradual, yeah. Pretty much.
It must make life easier nowadays.
Surely.
Like, I know not everybody's adopted it, but loads of folk must have adopted it. For you and your team, it must be easier that you can just log in and see what we see in real time.
Absolutely, yeah. The bigger businesses, we've got a lot of big businesses that are on Sage and Xero, but we've got other businesses that are just on Excel, right? And, I think, I'm quite sad, but I think Excel's probably the best thing in the world. It's just unbelievable. It's wonderful. So many things that you can do with Excel. And we still do some VAT returns on Excel. We do accounts on Excel. And actually, one of our accounting production packages is Excel based. We've got Sage as an accounts production package. We've got Xero as an accounts production package, but also Excel as well. So it has a lot of functions. So we use that. But it's great just being able to use computers. You don't want to be using paper to do paper accounts.
I mean, admittedly, I'm not an Excel wizard, but I do recognise that there's no much that's more satisfying than when you have the whole, like, you create it for nothing and then it's multi-tabbed and they roll up and it's formulated and it looks pretty. That moment, like I had it on Sunday.
I'm laughing because he's just
I was using a template, trying to get a cash flow forecasting tool sorted for us, and just over the Christmas period had been chipping away and trying to make it look a wee bit better. Final product on Sunday, and I was like, oh, that feels amazing. I'm so happy.
And I'll
with
give him
myself.
kudos. It is pretty good what you've done with it. Definitely something we need to show you to see if it makes sense. But yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I was very proud of that Excel spreadsheet you done.
Good.
And it's a proud moment when you get something squared on an Excel spreadsheet, or you get a result, or, with the numbers that you input. It's
all right, Dinesh, well, we always like to just dedicate a portion of the episode to having I know we've spoke about this offline, but for those that are listening, chat about like what does the future hold for you and your accountancy practice. So over to you, really. What does the next maybe 3 to 5 years look like for you? You try to dominate the world, or are you quite happy and just maintaining, and what comes in comes in?
I mean, I think I'm not looking to sort of expand. Not looking to open up other offices in other cities. I'm comfortable where I am. Certainly, I take on a new business. I never turn down new business, and I get a lot of referrals, and that allows the business to grow as well. And obviously, you can then just cater for that additional business with additional members of staff. I do actually have a member of staff that works overseas. So I've outsourced one. Well, in fact, I went out to India at one point to have a look at that model, and just being able to outsource my current services to them, because it's a lot cheaper. You're probably getting it for a fifth of the cost.
Yeah.
But when I went out there a few years ago, I decided at that point, and I thought, well, I can do this myself. I can actually find an employee rather than finding an agency that supplies staff in India. Find a person. So, and you've probably heard of the recruitment website Indeed. And I just went on to Indeed and put in the location Delhi.
Is it that
India.
easy? Is it?
Yeah,
Right, okay,
and incredibly, in the space of 30 minutes, I'd got 75 CVs. I thought, I've got to stop this. And they came through, and I managed to hire one. And I thought, that's how simple it is to get an employee. Now, it was painful at the start because you're training this person up, albeit that she had experience in accountancy. But I thought, well, this opens up another sort of field for me, because I can then grow this exponentially and also take on as many staff as I want and get it to keep costs low. But I think you still got to manage that side as well. So I've kind of got to a stage where in other accountants, and I've got a good friend that's asked me to merge, but I've resisted, and I've just thought to myself that I want to go it alone because I've got really good staff in my office that can look after the business. Well, I think that while I'm here actually, but that they kind of look after it. And as I kind of grow, not exponentially, but just grow, I'll be able to then take on additional members of staff, whether it's in the office or overseas. I mean, long term, I kind of don't think that far. I probably kind of have a kind of 12-month period looking into the future. And I just think to myself, well, I can probably add another 10, 20% of business onto my current business. Mm-hmm. And then I'll look at it again thereafter. I've had other people kind of asking me to invest into their businesses, and I kind of picked and chose on that. But probably I'll be doing accountancy for the rest of my life. I don't plan to retire at 65. I'm 50, coming up for 56 now. And you look
younger than me. Same here.
So it's sort of, when you get to about 67, that's probably proper retirement age. But I plan to work beyond that. Got many other things, but what I would like to do is probably just wind down a bit and let the staff then take over. Mm-hmm. And probably a key member of staff could then possibly take over the clients and the business itself.
I mean, for what it's worth, when we come and see you, certainly if it's a key meeting, it's you that we're meeting, but day to day it's your team members. It's typically Barry rather than me, to be fair.
Robert's brilliant, to be fair. He's always on hand really quickly.
Very impressive. And for me, half the battle, I guess, with accountancy is that if we're asking for information or advice, you normally need it quite quickly. I don't know if that's all business or just because we're small and agile and like to move quick on things. And that's something that working with you guys, we get quite frustrated at. You would send an inquiry off, I need a bit of advice, and 6 days had passed, and then you get a response and ChatGPT gave me the answer 5 days ago, we're on to something else. So I love the responsiveness, and I appreciate that must be really difficult to manage across all your clients. But
it's really important. I mean, that's one of the key features, and I kind of pass that on to my employees, that any emails have got to be responded to within sort of 2 hours, really. Even if it's just a holding email, if you need advice, just say, look, we'll come back to you in the next few hours. But, it is frustrating, Brian, because, I've got our Wi-Fi is actually down in the office. So broadband's working, but the Wi-Fi's down, and I think it's been down since Friday. So I phoned the telecoms company, and they said that, in fact, I emailed them, I get no response at all, and then I had to phone them. And they said, oh, right, okay, we'll have a look at it, but we're going to have to pass this over to somebody else and they'll come back to you. No one has come back to me, and, this is now Tuesday. But, I say to my staff, we've got to respond. Even if when they send in their records, just say, thank you, we will be in touch. And that's all you need to say, so that they know that, we've got something there.
It's just that assurance that your comms isn't going into a black hole. You're no left thinking, did they get it? Did they get it? And weirdly, literally sitting last night, quite late on, doing a bit of work, but live chatting Sky, to try and sort broadband for my dad who's moved into a new house. And then so I went for the bot to agent one, and he's like, oh, I can't help you, I need to pass it to another guy. Right, cool, I'm doing work anyway, it doesn't matter. So I then got to the third agent, and after I started my live chat at 5 to 6, 8 o'clock still hadn't been sorted, and they said, right, I know how you need to sort it, you just need to phone this number. And I was like, I don't want to phone that number, I've been speaking to you for 2 hours through live chat for a reason, because I'm sitting doing some work. So just forget it, and I moved on to another supplier.
Yeah.
So I don't know, the art of just responding to people and picking up the phone seems to have died.
Yeah, you've just got to be conscientious, I suppose, And, even before I was coming here, and I thought, well, I'm not going into the office this morning. I'll come straight here. But, I mean, 8:30, I was actually in the house, had my laptop on. I thought, right, I'll respond to these emails, just get them out to the ones that I can respond to, and the staff will pick up the other emails. But, you know, it's just having that sort of awareness that that client is going to be waiting. They want an answer from somebody, and you've got to, because that's, you know, it's not just about picking up a client and saying, right, we'll do your accounts, we'll do this, we'll do that. It's all the other bits and pieces in between that as well, you know, because they're wanting engagement, really, you know, and that's the biggest thing with any business. You've got to engage with the customer all the time. And
that shines through massively for you guys in the team. One of the things that I've really thought was hugely beneficial since I've joined you guys is just the level of understanding you show towards business owners. So if we're not getting you what you need in time, you know, you give us a nudge in the right manner and you make sure we do it right. It's not a get this now or else. It's very understanding. And when I'm asking questions to help me understand reports and balance sheet, be it you or Robert, you're very articulate and patient, and hopefully the level of my questions are slowly starting to come down, which is a good sign you're doing a good job. But what I would say, the service you have, Dinesh, is great, and you can see why you've done so well over the years.
No, it's always good to hear that. You know, we've had, we don't say to clients, look, put a review on our website or on a kind of Yale website, but maybe I should do that. And Yale keep pressurising me into doing that. But I just feel that we're doing it right. You know, most of the time we're doing it right. There will be the odd occasion where we've not been able to answer something straight away, but we say to the clients, we'll come back to you. And we always do, you know, whether we know it or not. And if we don't, we can't do the job. And if it's really specialist, we'll try and refer it to some other individual.
True referrals don't come for people seeing reviews and going, oh, I'll maybe pick up the phone to them. They come for, like, you know, us being out and about and speaking to a trades guy and him going, oh, my accountant's a fucking nightmare. I can't get a word in for him. I'm trying to get this info. And we go, pick up the phone to Dinesh, you know, like, he's done a great job for us. That's how true referrals work.
Yeah.
You know, it's you deliver the service holds itself up to account, and then that just brings additional customers in the door. All right, well, listen, thank you very much for being here today and sharing your story. Just finally, there might be business owners listening now that think, like the sound of this guy, I'm not particularly happy with my own. Where do they find you if they're looking to make that transition?
So we're based in Spearsbridge Business Park, which is the south side of Glasgow. So that's in Thornley Bank. And you're pretty much in, I mean, to find the place, it's actually quite easy because you've got the main Pollockshaw's roundabout. Now, I know that Thornley Bank Main Street is closed off just now, so it's hard to get through to Thornley Bank. But if you Google G46 8NG, DA Accountants is the name of the business, and we're in an open business business park, and there's plenty of parking there. So you're welcome to just drop in, and somebody in our office can then speak to you regarding any sort of tax matter. And if we can't answer or address your query there and then, we would certainly come back to you.
Perfect.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Dinesh.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being on. I loved that. Hopefully you enjoyed it too. Thanks as always to everybody for listening in. If you have not subscribed to our channels yet, what are you doing? We're a year in. Get yourself subscribed. A very small percentage of people that listen in actually subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Spotify channel. So get that sorted. We will be back in a couple of weeks' time with another business owner as always. So thanks for tuning in.